Hi everyone, my name is Hila Fish and I'm going to talk to you about open source, open choice. So what does it mean? It means that we're going to talk about open source adoption, and I will give you a set of tools to help ease your decision about open source adoption, when you should do it, and practical tools that you can use to choose the right open source project for you. A little bit about me. So I'm Hila Fish. I'm a senior DevOps engineer, currently working at Wix. I have 15 years of experience. I'm a DevOps culture fan, and I really am a collaborator at heart. Collaboration is present in a lot of aspects in my life. I really love giving back to the community, which open source realm and I have in common. And I'm doing so by being an co-organizer in DevOps Days Tel Aviv in Israel, and also StatsCraft Israeli Convention. I'm Israeli, and mentoring in Ops School, which is the DevOps local Israeli course, and Ba'ot, which is a community in tech for women. And in my spare time, I'm the lead singer in a cover band, which you can see in that pic. Okay, so let's talk about open source, right? So open source is a source code that is publicly available and can be modified at will. Some examples for our day-to-day tools that we widely use that is based on open source is Python, React, Firefox, Ubuntu, Git. So a lot of tools are really based on open source and we use it quite a lot. So in the late 90s, proprietary software was the standard, and the notion of making source code public was considered a bad strategy for tech companies. Coming forward to the 2020, the concept of open source became the norm and became mainstream, and a lot of companies started to adapt it. So open source helps build a rich developer community, that it's a society that is based on knowledge and relies on the core values of communication and collaboration to succeed. I think that without it, the open source wouldn't be in the place that it is right now. This is a quote from Manish Sharma, who's the general manager of GitHub India. He basically said that adopting open source will expose companies to a large global pool of talents, and that it will help speed up the business transformation and really make companies succeed in the fast-changing digital world. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about the DevOps perspective for open source, right? Because usually open source is something in the realm of developers and not really or much discussed from the DevOps perspective. And this talk will actually about how to, or mostly about how to adopt projects on your environment, on your day-to-day, and how to do it and when to do it and stuff like that. So I will give you the DevOps perspective for open source. So in order to understand the DevOps perspective, we first need to understand the developer's perspective. So their decision whether to use an open source library or not really relies on functionality factors, like will it get integrated in my code properly? What efforts are needed to do so? As opposed to that, DevOps or SRE's personnel, their decision is different. We really rely on environment factors, like how well the projects get integrated in my environment. And also we have considerations like security, maintenance, everything that could affect the environment stability. So I think that the really common ground between open source and DevOps is collaboration. It really is important, and it is the setting stone for both of our needs, because open source couldn't succeed without it, and so doesn't DevOps. And also, when communities form around shared challenges, the diversity of ideas that naturally emerges surfaces better solutions. So there's a saying that great minds think alike, but a lot of minds think differently, and it's good because we want to gain and have the best solution possible. We DevOps people treat open source projects as tools, so we can really be flexible with what we introduce to our systems, because integration is no concept that is strange for us. Okay, so we said that the environment stability is what we care most, right? So we are basically in a constant state of trade-offs to have to maintain a balance in our environment. So upgrades, if we want to, get more features or have bug fixes, then we need to do it, but without rocking the boat too much. Also, variety. There's a lot of tools out there. Each tool brings its own complexity, and it is something that we need to consider once we introduce it to the environment. Take, for example, Jenkins. Please show me one person that is not afraid to upgrade the plugins because without any fear that it will mess everything up and break everything. So it's really something that needs to be careful with it. Also, Kubernetes has its own dependencies that we need to consider. And in the middle of everything, we have research. We do a lot of research, online one, reviewing project tools and etc. In YouTube videos to understand how people are using it, and reviews. And we read on online materials, so we really know we want to make sure that we know what we introduce to our environment. Okay, and another thing which is very important for us is that we always need to keep tabs and be informed, because I really like this picture. It says keep moving people without anyone there, right? So this is exactly it. We need to keep moving and be proactive in our approach of getting the updates, even if no one is nagging us. No team leader says, hey, please check this and please do that, because it's something that it is very important to be posted on everything. So I will give an example. A project, for example, an open source project, the first version was not good or not really fitting my use case, but then the second version does. So if I wouldn't check it, periodically, then I would know that the second version would be good for me. Also, deprecation. If we will take CentOS operation system case that it reached end of life at the end of 2021. So we really need to be aware of it, because without it, our system will deprive from security patches, which is not a good thing, and we need to be aware of it and consider alternatives. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the adoption itself, right? So when should we adopt open source? So one case is when our use case is uncommon. So let's say, for example, in my previous work, I integrated KEDA at work, which is an open source tool to downscale Kubernetes pods to 0. We used GKE, and GKE allowed to downscale only to 1. So we had a use case that the product shelf company, Google Cloud, didn't have solution for us, so we needed to find a solution of our own, or not really our own, but online. And then we found KEDA and integrated it. So incorporating open source project in its raw form with already available features could be enough for you. And if so, then just do it. Budget. So when your budget is limited and you can't really afford purchasing an enterprise license of the software, then you can use its free version or open source alternative. It will also allow lower total cost of ownership, because adopting open source software generally has a lower cost, because the software itself often comes at no cost or relatively low cost, and shifts the cost center from licensing to customization and implementation. And training, maintenance, and support will be equally invested in an open source or in an open source project adoption or proprietary software integration. So might as well boost open source adoption if no significant reason is preventing you from doing so. Insufficient in-house resources to create a solution of your own, capacity-wise or ability-wise, like this guy. So, but hey, maybe you don't have resources to create a solution from scratch, but you do have sufficient in-house resources to extend usability of an existing open source project, and then it can really meet the company's specific needs. And also you can think of it in another way, that your developers could spend their time reinventing wheels that the open source community have already perfected. So why do something if it is already being done, right? And lastly, open source is here to stay and you want to be part of it. This is a list of companies that contribute a lot to open source. So it's something that you really should consider. Okay, so what's so great about open source, right? I mean, what's in it for you? So if you look at the Linus law, as they say, of given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. So it means that a lot of people can really review the code and find issues. Because the code is publicly available, anyone can spot and correct errors or omissions. So it's something that you can really rely on. Also, adaptive. So open source is really adaptive to various use cases. The more users the project has, the more use cases and the more robust code it will be. It is really a blessed drift from the originally intended publisher's idea to the system, because maybe it started with one use case and then more users came and had a lot other use cases. This really allows surfacing bugs and edge cases much more rapidly than traditional QA processes. It really encourages more modularity, avoiding the one-size-fits-all kind of assumption, and then result in greater flexibility and lower customization costs in the long run. Another upside is that open source follows modern software development processes, which actually leads to rapid development cycles and then more frequent releases without sacrificing quality. And another upside is that it has less bureaucracy, right? So opening a PR versus opening a ticket on a commercial support ticket platform, it's a very entirely different thing. When you open a PR, usually there are guidelines of what information you should provide the maintainers in order to get response for your PR the proper way. And when you open a support ticket, you just wait. You need to wait to their timelines, and also on a PR, it's their timelines, but it could be Friday night, Saturday night, because it's on their terms, rather than a established company that has business hours. And also on a proprietary software company, there are regularly scheduled release processes. So that this is something that doesn't exist on the open source community. So this is also something to look at. Okay, so like everything in life, open source has upsides and downsides. So let's look at the downsides. One of them, the most crucial thing, is security by obscurity, which is something on the proprietary software angle. So they could claim that their code is more secure than open source alternatives because of that, because hackers can't really find or exploit security loopholes because the code is not available to view. Another thing is that sometimes open source is something that is prone to abuse. We can take the last two events that we had, Colors NPM package, in which the maintainer introduced infinite loop to the code, making it just break, and then company, they had a mess. And also Faker.js, the maintainer had a bankruptcy and decided that the next version of the code would be just to delete the entire library. And also it caused issues. So of course, people can put and lock the versions in package.json or requirements.txt, but it's something that could happen. And if all people just lock the versions, then we wouldn't even know about these issues, right? Because it wouldn't affect anyone. So it's something that could happen, and we need to consider it. Compliance. So in its raw form, open source usually gives no warranty or official guarantee, making it difficult to use in a business environment where compliance is a must. So it's something that also needs to be considered. Another downside, that is it always free? Not so much. Licenses needs to really be examined because maybe it's not that free, or the licenses have their own terms. So it's something that needs to be considered. Discontinued projects. So as we know, open source is something that people are managing on their own time and on their goodwill. So sometimes project will be discontinued, and if so, then you need to make sure that if it happens with a project that you integrate in your production environment, either you will need to replace the technology or take full ownership of this project, which is something that really should be very well examined before we introduce such thing to a production environment. Another downside is that open source has actually no guarantees, right? Not support guarantee and not a project evolution, that you can't decide which features are going next to the next version. as opposed to when you purchase a shelf product software, it usually comes with a guarantee of official support from the developers for a fixed period of time. So it's, it's an advantage to the proprietary software companies, but it's also only a rule of thumb and has its exceptions, because product shelf software support doesn't mean it will be honored or delivered in a proper way. So it's something to both consider. And eventually, SaaS alternatives. So SaaS alternatives it's not really the opposite of open source, but on some occasions, companies will prefer the SaaS managed solution because it saves them time to manage the software, time to integrate it. The dev enablement shifts from DevOps dependency to a cloud-lock scenario that in the overall, the trade-off is worthwhile. And I think that the SaaS popularity is likely only to rise as organizations shift more and more resources to the cloud. So to sum things up, there is no right and wrong when it comes to open source software adoption. It's a matter of perspective, and there are multiple factors to consider. Each company and even specific department in a company should consider its pain points and whether the trade-offs of these pain points versus the benefits of using the open source project is worthwhile. Okay, so let's say that, cool, you decided that you want to adopt open source project. Kudos for you. You Googled your use case in Google, you found like 2 or 3 optional projects to use. How do you know that these options are good enough? How do you know that which one to choose, right? So there are key indicators that you can use in order to really understand and choose the right project for you. GitHub stars, so how many stars it has, or forks, or how many people are watching the project. So it's something that really is considered a good metric. Is the project part of CNCF or incubator, which is a list of inventory projects that are hosting? So if they are there, that probably it's a good indication that these projects were vetted, and you want to, and you can rely that these on the fact that these projects are good enough to use. You should Google the project alone to check for online presence, but you should also Google the project versus similar products to check for reviews. Ease of use. So do a POC, see how well the project gets integrated in your environment, and also check the time to implement until the integration is done. If it took a lot of time, then maybe it's not that easy to use. And also check out the GitHub issues. Are the issues about features or about how do I do X? Because if they're about how do I do X, then maybe the project is not really easy to use. Activity. So check out the commits rate. Are they weekly, daily, monthly, weekly, daily, monthly? If so, then it means that it's really active, right? So how many issues are there? How many releases are there? Is the project maintained by one developer or more? Because is the project has sponsors? Everything, all of these indicators could really let you know that if you have features that are needed or bug fixes, then you would know roughly how long you should wait or need to wait in order to get them. Documentation. So documentation is the gateway for the project, right? You came across the project, you don't know anything about it, so you start to read the documentation, and this is how you know if the project is right for you, if it will be easy to integrate or not. So if the documentation is rich and covers most aspects, like how to integrate, known issues, explanation about the features and stuff like that, then you know that it will be probably easy to use and integrate, and so on. Ecosystem. So I think that the main key metric that you could use from here and take from the entire presentation is the ecosystem, right? Because I'll explain through a story. In my previous job, I used CI, for a CI tool, I used Rundeck, which at that time had a small ecosystem, and the documentation wasn't that good, in my opinion. So whenever I needed to tweak existing flows or introduce new capabilities, then it was very hard for me, because I tried to reach out for help and nobody really helped me. And it was very hard and frustrating, as opposed to Jenkins. On my next job, when I used it, it was awesome, because there was a lot of online material to use. Jenkins has a dedicated Slack channel, and then I reached out and people are just willing to help, which is very nice to see. So it has its differences and it will affect your day-to-day. So ecosystem is very, very important. Readiness. So the project that I mentioned, KEDA, it was declared as a production-ready project, which is very good for me as DevOps to know, because it means that people are using it in production, and it means that this project is in a stable enough state for production. So it's very good for me to know. Current features, are they enough to sustain usage? Is the use case covered fully in the current state? And if not, am I okay with it? Because if not, maybe I should wait for the next version to come out and then it will fit my use case more in a better way. And roadmap, does the project defined as an open source or plan to go towards monetization, like what happened with InfluxDB? It started as an open source and then it switched to closed source. So if you're not willing to pay for licenses and stuff like that, it's something to check it out. And also features planning. If the project is really structured and well thought of, then features will be planned, and then you can see what is the roadmap for the project ahead. So choosing the right open source project should be based on two types of metrics. Basic metrics to understand if the project is in a ready enough state, and specific metrics to see if the project is covering your pain points. So for example, if you have a heavy use case, you should rely on documentation and ecosystem size metrics. So when I say rely, I mean that you should give these metrics more weight in your decision. Also, if, for example, you don't have capacity for maintenance, then you should rely and give weight for the readiness and ease of use metrics. So choosing the right open source project can be challenging, but to ease the selection decision, ask the general questions to cover the basics, ask the tailored specific questions to cover your use case and your pain points, do a POC, see how well the project gets integrated in your environment, and rely on your research. Ecosystem to the rescue, reach out for help if you're stuck, and engage in GitHub, raise issues, or even contribute to the project success and eventually your success. And a small token for me, how can you contribute to open source without writing a single line of code? So you can open issues, bug fixes, feature requests. It will benefit everyone. Modify documentation, because writing documentation is a technical skill which is usually needs to be perfected. So if you have this skill perfected, awesome, do it. Everyone will thank you. Share your use case. So for example, I've written a blog post about Script Server, which is an open source tool I used in my previous job. I wrote about the use case, about how I integrated it. So I hope that doing that helped the project gain visibility, and also I hope that I've shown people that if they have use case similar to mine, then I help them see the possible solutions out there. You found open source tools online that could help your colleagues and techie friends. Awesome, share it. Hold an open source mindset. So aim to incorporate open source projects wherever possible and reasonable, because doing so will help others follow your lead, and then open the minds of others as well, and others will follow. And lastly, spread the word on open source at conferences like I'm doing just now. Thank you very much. And you're willing to, and you're more than welcome to reach out through LinkedIn, mail, and Twitter if you want to, if you have questions or you want help with something, I would be more than willing to help. Thank you.